Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls. It's been a while since we have looked at the Marseille majors, and today I am here to share with you a few new decks and reflect on these cards. Primarily, I am interested in the nuances of how I may read this card differently using an older deck than if I would with a contemporary deck. I want to look at some of the details in the cards and a little bit of the evolution of what happened here. I am no tarot history. I am not a tarot historian, but just a lover of cards and a lover of reading tarot. So welcome, and please feel free to join in the discussion if you feel so inclined. The decks that I'm starting with today on the table left to right are the Tarot Fine della Torre, which is the oldest, or the reproduction of the oldest deck that I have. And the cards that you're looking at on the table right now are all 18th century. Approximately left to right, they go from the oldest one is on the left. The Jacques Viavi is next to that. And then this is the Dodal, and this is a new deck in my library. This is the Tarot Pierre Madanier of 1709. It's a little bit out of focus. I'll pick it up to the camera in a little bit. Welcome, Perry. So, where do we want to begin with this? This archetype has been very fundamental to how I read cards or to how I work with the tarot. And I think the number 7 is highly significant here. The tarot is all about the number 7. And there is, I think, an extraordinary body of energy in this card and in the number 7. It is, if you look at it more contemporarily, where we are looking at septenaries, it is the accumulation of the experience of the first septenary from the magician. And it's a place, it's a tipping off place. It's like the edge of the world where we head out really into the unknown. And there's a lot of discussion about whether this charioteer knows where he's going or where he is not going. I think what is clear is that he's going, or maybe that there is not a choice here to venture forth. When this card comes up in a reading, you're on the precipice of something, and something really, really great, and something perhaps you feel quite passionate about. It is an extraordinary place to be to receive this card. And so let's look at some of the details here. I am quite inspired. The chariot itself is, from what I understand, the perspective in art is not something that was drawn in this day and age. And so it really isn't significant that the wheels don't look like they are forward moving. Nor do I feel that the weight or the solidity or the immovability of the chariot is necessarily significant here. We have a a box-looking shape that has two parts. The bottom is connected to wheels, perhaps, led by horses. And this container is going to take us somewhere. And I am really attracted to the wheat, the plant life that is in the foreground. And I think that stimulates something. It shows new life. It shows new growth. Even in the Fine della Torre, we have that green in the foreground. So we are moving towards something new. And then when I move up in this card, before I even look at the charioteer or the chariot itself, the horses are so important. They say a lot, and they seem to have a story unto their own, separate from the charioteer. They have a communication. They have a connection to one another. And in many of the older decks, they are connected. They look like Siamese twins. They are one. They are part of the same being. They could come out of, Dr. Dolittle movie, some sort of crazy Dr. Seuss book. And so what these horses represent, I really think it does go back to Plato and the analogy that we've all become very familiar with in this metaphor. And I think the fact that they're connected, this just reminds me of twin stories, and how twins know what each other are thinking. They move and behave in the same way. There's just some unspoken level of connection. And there's lots of discussion about, okay, well, their heads may be moving in the same direction, but their bodies are not. Does that mean they will quickly adapt and adjust and go in the same direction? Or is there some differentiation of mind? And I think more recently, this is a card that's come to mean that in order to move forward, we need to align the left and right sides of the brain. We need to align our receptive lunar self with our active solar self and behave and move in a way that is yoked. It's unified. It's harmonious. And I just think it's so interesting. Like in the Via V deck, how, or VA, what is the name of that deck? Via V. The faces, the human faces. And even in many of the other decks, the horses seem to be somewhat anthropomorphized, a little cartoonish, and it appears as if they could speak the same language. They speak the same language as the charioteer above. So whether that's Italian or Spanish or French Swiss or whatever that language is, they know the language of the charioteer above. And it's in the Dodal. I mean, the eyes are so funny in the Dodal. It makes me wonder what these people are thinking. And the weight, the physical weight of the body, regardless of the armor, seems to be quite different in these cards too. Like the Via V, the charioteer is quite a large person. And that might say something as well too. In the right hand, generally speaking, of the charioteer is some sort of a baton or a sword held in the right hand, symbolizing action, ready to go forth, whether this is a contest, whether this is a journey, whether this is a war. It's powerful that it's held in the right hand. And if you look at the left hand, except for the Fine Delatore, and I want to look at a contemporary deck as well too in comparison with that one, what is the left hand doing? Well, it is not holding reins. Excuse me. It is on the hip. Quite an interesting pose. I'm just looking to see if one of them looks a little more cocky than the other. But there's a level of confidence, I feel, that's portrayed. The hand on the hip. Here I am. Are you seeing me? Because here I am and I'm ready to go. And I don't need to have any reins. I am in, this whole vehicle is united. This whole vehicle is me. And I'm going forward. Sans reins. So arrogance, perhaps. Hello, Jitendra. So yeah, it's a funny card. It is a funny card. Hi, Dee. Welcome. I wonder too about the color of the horses, and there's some discussion about the use of blue in the tarot, and that in the especially in the early decks, the colors were very specific in what they meant. And in the Fine Delatore, the horses are a horse color, and not so much in the two decks on the right. Hi, Saskia. And so I wonder how much weight I would put into the blue color of the horses, blue being the color of spirit. They are not a natural animal color. So here is spirit being anthropomorphized. Question. It's just a question. Which again sort of takes the horses forward. It's like the horses are the frontal part of the brain. I don't know. I want to go back and actually read. I did quite a bit of reading in neurobiology when I was studying, when I was doing training for Yoga Nidra. And it's absolutely fascinating. And maybe even going back into reading some of the writings, Plato's writings, because I think there's something here. There's something here to that. It feels, I don't know. Can I say it's incontrovertible? I don't know. It's hard for me to let that kind of interpretation go. Except for the deck on the left. The defined separation between above and below is striking. That line is striking. And you would hear many tarologists put the two pieces together in one shape. So we have perhaps a triangle represented above, so from the crown of the charioteer, right? So we have a triangle, and this the triangle above gets placed in the square below. And we have a shape, we have spirit over matter. We have that whole discussion of the 4 plus 3 and the number 7 and the union of the masculine and the feminine and the way that that is explored in the minor arcana, I think, is kind of significant here. I mean, I think this is truly a formative card, and one that, when you're studying the tarot, can really sort of change the direction of your study. It's a lot. It's a lot to absorb, and it feels more accessible than the alchemical kind of interpretations that come in some of the other arcanum, because those happen later with a more when esotericism begins to be discussed. But I think here, I mean, Plato, this is old, right? And this is a pretty common symbol that we have seen through the centuries. And so I want to go back and look to the green and the wheat and the grain and the plants that are growing in the foreground, because I think that's significant as well. You'll notice there's a big difference between the deck on the left and the other three, and that there is a canopy overhead. And that, of course, there was lots of different designs of chariots. Chariots were used for different purposes, and this almost looks more like a something that would carry a prince, which is a little different than the deck that's on the left. But this is a characteristic, of course, that is used to define centuries or types of tarot. Type 1, Type 2, Tarot de Marseille. Yeah. Do you like this card? Does it inspire? The Epaulette. There's a lot of discussion too about the Epaulette and what that might represent. And I know that those particular epaulettes are carried through. Some of the kings in the Tarot de Marseille wear them as well too. Sometimes they are colored differently. Sometimes they are the same color. It looks as if in Jacques Vieilleville, Dodal, and Madanier, they are both the same color. Are they the same faces? Perhaps. Perhaps. And yes, they could be sun and moon. They could be two suns. And when I think about them in terms of two suns, it just seems to add that idea of power, and generals and soldiers who wear symbols, masculine symbols, symbols of power. You know, there's lots of blades and upward facing triangles, right, on contemporary military uniforms. So yeah. And then we also have a similar symbol. So in the Fine Delatory over on the far left, it would appear that we don't have a sun and a moon, but that looks more like two suns to me. They are colored very similarly. Yeah. And so, yes, very, as Perry says, they are very ornate, and it's hard to, I mean, the fabric beneath, the clothing beneath the armor is also beautiful, and we, of course, we can't see the lower portion of the body. Yes, wealth and opulence. And so there's something here that feels a little different. Or maybe this is a different aspect in reading the tarot from how I read it today. Because somehow, some way, I seem to have dropped, quite literally, dropped this awareness of wealth and opulence when I'm looking at a contemporary tarot, even the Waite-Smith tarot, which I'm staring at right now. Because you would be coming from royalty, right? You'd be very, very wealthy to be dressed in this way and armored in this way. Let's go to Dee's comment. The numerology of 7 plays out in many religions and philosophical writings. We are surrounded by important 7s. Yes. 7 days of creation, 7 days of the week, 7 colors of the rainbow, continents, oceans, chakras. It's everywhere, right? And the tarot having 21 majors, right, is 777. The minor arcana, 14, so 2 7s. It's a lot of 7s. And it's almost like this is a fundamental, like I said before, it's a fundamental card. This is a fundamental vibration of the tarot. It's an exciting card. And, you know, well, let's just look at, see if there's any other details here I want to take apart at this time. Definitely a crown on the head. And this is the first deck that actually has initials on it, on that shield, on that symbol. You take note, have a look at all of your chariot cards, because there are many that don't have any letters on that symbol at the front. And there's all kinds of discussion about what that may or may not represent. Oh, I was talking about the RWS. So what we don't see in the Tarot de Marseille or these variations of the cards is the background. And I think one of the things that really changed in this card was the inclusion of the background, because that walled city, the fortress behind, it really adds meaning, right? I have stepped out of that. I'm going forward. It just gives a different energy. So in these cards, there's something about perhaps the horses. I really love the Dodal horses. Oh my goodness. And the black and the emphasis of those plants. There's something about the horses and the charioteer himself that feel more significant than the message of the whole card. Some writers wonder if the moons on the prince's shoulders might be the faces of the females the lover was deciding between in the previous card. So in that case, they would be both moons, perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe one lover was a man and one lover was a woman. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at a few other cards. Okay, on the left is the Rivso by Ben Groh. And in the center, This is a new deck. I have been shopping. This is the deck that inspired this deck. So this is the deck of Jean-Pierre Payen. Jean-Pierre Payen, 1713. So now we're 18th century. And so I do want to do a side-by-side of these two decks and have a closer look at how Ben Gros chose to color the Revisite Tarot. And then on the far right, Minchiati, El Signo. I can't quite recall what was the motivation to pick up a Minchiati deck, but I did. And of course, the numbers are a little different. It's a very different sort of can of worms. We have 4 cards. We have lots more cards in this deck. But I think it's interesting to compare and contrast the Chariot here and look at what's going on, because we don't have a crown. There's something in this energy that feels a lot more raw. And yet the way that the fabric, the ribbon, the cape is held feels powerful. It feels like this could be more of a contest or something. Yeah. I have a new historic deck, the VOV. It has the most strange horses, a cross between the horses and a sphinx. Weird. Okay. It's really fascinating to look at what is going on in these cards. Okay. Now, if you look at the faces of the horses, there is deep communication going on here. And we also have an arrow going in both directions on the shield, which is really interesting. And that is something you'll see when I put this down. That was not in the original Payen deck. And he's picked up on the black color in the Dodal. There is black in the Payen, but it's certainly not as black. But I really like the way the horses are looking at each other. I don't have a Conver deck on the table, but I was reading Jodorowsky this week, rereading Jodorowsky, and he does talk about a male and a female horse. And I think that's something kind of fun to look at in your Chariot cards. To see if one half looks more masculine, more feminine. And I know he does talk about eyelashes or hooded eyes or closed eyes and open eyes. And if you look at this VOV, we've got one of them has a horned hat and one has a flat hat. So you could say for sure on the right is feminine, on the left is masculine. And if we're looking at that from the viewpoint of the charioteer, then the left hand of the charioteer is feminine. Yeah, Perry, I kind of agree with you. The horses seem superior to the foolish man who's in charge of the situation. Now, can you take that sentence and apply that to the human condition? What I mean here is, can we say what aspects of the human brain, the human mind, that the horses represent, and right? I want to try to apply that. I remember one of and I know there's stories like this all over the place, but it was in a yoga training. And the end of the story goes is that if we don't try to control the horses will know where the water is. The horses will know how to take us home. The horses will know the correct route. We need to trust the horses. And that is so very difficult for many a human. And that's why I think this card sort of, it predates all of the esoterica that has been attached to the tarot. And I mean, this is not esoterica. This is neurobiology, an understanding of neurobiology. Yeah, Perry. Okay, Dee says, one horse looks more grumpy in all of my true Marseille decks. So I don't know which one is the grumpy horse. We are thinking that we are the center of the universe. And so you could look at that as, right, man over animal. And yet, in many of the decks, the animal has been colored blue, which is the energy of spirit. So, I think this can lean in a few different directions. What do you think of this card as numbered 10 in the Minchiadi deck? It kind of appeals to me. I mean, I see this as a card of great change. And sometimes when we're talking about endings and beginnings and the energy of the number 10, we do need something to carry us forward. Change can be really, really difficult. Well, yeah, I do. I love the freedom, the carefreeness, as Dee said, of that particular card. Can we talk about the Bhagavad Gita? Is that okay? I had this thought, and I actually picked up a translation, and I was going to read some of it today, and I put it back on the shelf. In the VAV, it's 8. Oh, how interesting. Okay, so here's my thought. Not in every chariot is the charioteer. What do I want to say? Sometimes in a chariot, there's a driver and there's a soldier. So maybe the charioteer is the driver and the soldier rides behind, and he's the one that's going to hop out and fight or fight from the chariot, right? Because as you're going forward, it's really hard to drive and fight at the same time. Especially if you've got 2 horses in a vehicle to control. So I think this is all really interesting, because that's why there's no reins, is because it's all sort of a unified piece. So where I was going with the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna is the charioteer and Arjuna is the warrior. And I've often thought about this body of work when I'm looking at this card, especially because in the Waite Smith Tarot, which I did have in hand somewhere, that the sphinxes have stopped. Now, granted, in some of these older decks, the horses look like they are moving. They are not. They are definitely not stationary. One leg, like they're ready to go, or they're right. They're moving. They're kind of moving slowly. Which is very different from the seated sphinxes in the Waite-Smith. And so that's something else I want to look at. In that Minchiati deck, wow, they're roaring to go. You know, they're taking off. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna has a moment where he orders Krishna to stop the chariot. And so they stop not too far out on the battlefield and have a conversation for the length of this chapter, this poem, which is part of a larger body of work called the Mahabharata. And the issue here, I mean, the bottom line here has to do with following one's dharma. It is our right. It is our duty. It is our obligation to know our path. And it was so much clearer in certain cultures in certain days what one's path was. You were either born into the path of priesthood, or you were born into the path of soldier, or you were born into the path of whatever it was. And it was considered to be sacrilegious not to follow your path. And I think this conversation is really interesting in terms of this card. Because it's a card, like I said, that culminates the first septenary. It is a card that talks about matter and spirit and man and animal and aspects of the brain. And there's something about the sevens, almost like an impatience of knowing or not knowing what I'm doing or where I am. I mean, a lot of people write about this card and they say, oh, of course he knows where he's going. I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure. Questions about the issues of going to war with such a huge commitment to be aggressively messing with energies of aggressively killing. It's a huge discussion. And these sorts of moments of consciousness where we stop and we think, what are we really doing here, are momentous. And I think this is a momentous card. When a prince was in a chariot in a parade, a groom would be leading the horse. Many paintings from 14th and 15th century show a triumph parade showing these chariots. I think that's one of the reasons why the Tarot de Marseille chariots feel so different from what's going on in contemporary decks. And yet, we still have this opportunity to have a discussion about this relationship between the horses and the charioteer. let alone the chariot itself, right? Because we have three parts. We have the chariot itself, the charioteer, and the horses. And, you know, this can be body, ego, higher mind. I mean, there's lots of different ways that you can look at these three parts. Okay, and then, oh, I have more. I have lots more. Okay. Soprafino, Il Meninghello, Gassman. Look at this. Oh my goodness. This is the one I was thinking of. Look at that pose. Look at the metal, the construction of the chariot, and the elegance and the strength of the horses. And the symbol that is between looks like a ram. I'm not sure what that is in the center. This is a very masculine card. And yet, it most definitely is a prince. It is so opulent. It almost does. It looks like a victory parade. And I'm so intrigued with these horses. The horse on the right. It's like they're having a private conversation amongst themselves. And this one has a space. Now, one of you mentioned this deck last time I was on, and I didn't have it, and it's rather inexpensive, so I found a copy of it. It's not in English, the booklet, but I can look it up. This is Tarot of the Master, and we do not see any animals here. And in this case, the charioteer is most definitely sitting, not standing. The scepter's in the opposite hand. So I haven't even looked through this whole deck, but I thought this is a very different portrayal. Okay, so let's just review Perry's comments here. We never really knew how we are going to continue to terrorize and threaten other people. Okay, you're talking about the horrible war experience. Leaders are safe and sound in their lives with arrogance and their own perspective on their own personal health and victory. The horses seem to realize the way they are going is questionable. Such an, you know, and when we look at these cards in terms of contemporary issues and situations, like I said, I think this is a very formative card that's going to help make wise choices. I really do. And I love that tarot is ever evolving and gives us the power to contemplate and rethink choices. I don't tend to do many readings for historical or political purposes. I'm pretty busy working with humans in their own worlds. But I know that there's a bunch of readers out there that do that with success. And I think this card is really significant in that way. This favorite deck, I know Saskia, this is one of your favorites, really sort of goes back to the older decks where the horses are one piece, one mind, one body, right? Even in the Pierre Madanier, the body is body of the horses is joined. And yet, Donofrio chose to put reins in this one. Now, this deck is not a Tarot de Marseille, and yet it holds many of the qualities of one. And so I think in reading with this deck, you got to read it as it's drawn. And I think that applies too with contemporary chariot cards. A lot of contemporary chariot cards also do not have reins, and some do. So this really says something about our relationship with control. Yeah. And I'm just going to conclude or close with I bought a gurgly deck. And this deck is, oh my goodness, it is so much fun. I just love looking at these pictures and the expressions of the people in these pictures. Now you'll see that I believe what the creator and this is from Tarot Key 23. Gurgly, I can't read the name, it's too little. Gurgly is the first name. Oh, and that's not even the name. It's Gergay. Perhaps Gergay is that the way it's pronounced. I did listen to an interview, and I need to get that name in my mind. This is the box. What this creator has done in their decks is to take the pieces of the tarot that resonate the most with the creator. And so we see a real blended variation of this era of tarot decks. The horses are blue. They are not conjoined. We have the orb and the sword in the same hands, same positions as in the Fine della Torre. And there is a lot of swapping of male and female faces. There is also discussion, and I don't know how much you buy into it, that the charioteer is a female in disguise. Obviously not in that card. And so the fact that the creator on the left chose to put a woman here is really interesting. And the simplicity of this deck, the white space, absolutely love the white space. It just, it does exactly that. It gives you space to read. And isn't this, I mean, this is this card, like when I look at this one, is one of the Tarot de Marseille that fills up more space than perhaps any other in the tarot. Like it fills up the whole part of the painting. And so many bits and pieces and layers to look at. Yeah. All right. Tarot of the Master. Yes, it has wheels, but it's not going anywhere. So why? Perry, there is no real control in our lives or the lives of others. It's a crying shame that we are so incredibly ignorant about this situation that is threatening our world with insanity and illusion. Choice, reflection, self-reflection. Imagine the conversation between the horses in the deck on the left. Like, it's really funny. You can almost hear it. And I imagine that, I don't know. I don't think the charioteer can hear the horses talking. Yeah. This is an extraordinary card. I really I love the conversations that it evokes when it comes up in a reading, and the things it prompts out of queerance. Endless discussion. Yeah. So thanks for joining in. I will continue this series, but in 2 weeks' time, it's my birthday next Saturday. So I'll see you then. 2 weeks. Thanks. Bye for now. Appreciate you all.